All right. Hello, class. We are going to learn about balance, symmetrical and asymmetrical balance. And you're going to have a small project learning about balance. Um, balance is the distribution of visual weight within a composition. So in pictorial balance, if you imagine an axis, so if you look at an image and wherever your body is standing, it's usually in the middle of the image, and we kind of, without even realizing it, we make that into an axis. And the weight on the right and left should feel equal. If they don't feel equal, we will feel uncomfortable or uneasy. There's also vertical balance from the top to the bottom. That's not really that important. Sometimes you want the vertical balance to be off, and sometimes you don't. But the horizontal balance, the right and left, it almost always should feel equal. That said, if you want the viewer to be uneasy, then you want to push it. So if you look at this image, the right side feels heavier than the left side, just a little bit, because there is this red line that kind of moves you that way. But it's enough that we start to feel uneasy. And Guston, the painter, wanted us to feel uneasy when looking at this image. Okay, let's talk about what symmetrical balance is. It's also called bilateral balance, and it's the simplest kind of balance to recognize and see because it looks exactly the same from right to left. And there's no difference between each side. So if you look at this is a picture of Audrey Hepburn. So we would consider this first image right here is the original. We would consider that symmetrical. It's technically asymmetrical because her hair is not the same and her features aren't exact, but it's realistic. No, no person is completely symmetrically balanced. So if you look over here where it's exactly perfectly symmetrically balanced, it's pretty awkward actually. So her features kind of become perfect. Her hair is split in a weird way, and it's kind of creepy. She looks robotic. So that's the thing with symmetrical balance is it can make us uncomfortable in a different way. It can feel too similar. Here's an example of a portrait by Alex Katz. So I would say this is symmetrical, but again, I mean, it's not perfectly symmetrical, but people are not perfectly symmetrical. But overall, the balance is symmetrical. There's similar things on the right and the left. And in your assignment, which will be photos, that's what I'm looking for, that it's not exact, that each shape is not exact, but very, very close. Very, very close. Okay, so symmetrical balance can also be called formal balance. It can create a feeling of permanence, strength, stability. It can feel sedate, calm, dignified. It can unify the whole composition because it's the same from right to left. It's used a lot in architecture, mostly in government buildings and churches, because that creates they want to create a feeling of stability and a feeling of strength. So this is an example of an altar in the St. Peter's Vatican. And so it's very symmetrical. The church itself is symmetrical from the angle we're looking at it, right? And then the altar is symmetrical. This side and this side are exactly the same. And so that creates a sense of permanence and stability. When used correctly, symmetry can reinforce subject matter, but it also can be used as a crutch. Because it's the easiest to identify, sometimes students do it automatically without thinking. And you do not want to do that. You want to choose, is this subject matter best? Would it be best that I use symmetry? And really think through that, not just automatically doing it. Doing this emphasizes the subject matter and the content of the art piece. Alright, so here's a ironic play on our expectations of a landscape because it's perfectly symmetrical it doesn't look correct because a mountain isn't perfectly symmetrical. And then it says step on, no pets, which is a play on words because the word step on turns into no pets. All right, so that's symmetrical. Asymmetrical balance is also called informal balance because it seems casual, but it's harder to create. Asymmetrical balance is harder to create, at least when you're making a drawing. We're going to do photos. I think it's actually easy when we're doing a photo. But what it means is that dissimilar elements have same visual weight. So if you look at this here, we probably put, so the axis, the middle is here, but because there's already a line, we probably would associate our body with right here. And if you look, this side and this side feel equal even though they're very different. Part of that is the bright red down here and the bright red right there, and then the black and black. This black is shiny, creating a little more attention. Also, the black objects are irregular, which creates more attention. And then these have a lot of words that create some give our eye or want our eye to look at it. So we end up looking at this side and this side about equal, which makes it feel balanced. Okay, so we're basing this on equal eye attention. So even though there might be more of one thing on one side and less of another thing on the other side, if the balance is or if the eye spends about equal amount of time on each side of the image, then the image feels balanced. So in this photograph, we look at the figure here. They have their eyes are kind of intense, kind of sad, mourning, maybe depressed eyes, and so the face does attract us because of that. And so we'll look at the side. But because of the hand, their hand shooting this way, and the cigarette going this way, and then the shadow and this little piece of furniture, we end up having a lot to look over here. And so that balances out the intensity of the face. Okay. There's 4 ways to achieve asymmetrical balance. Balance by value or color, balance by shape, balance by texture and pattern, and balance by position and eye direction. So a strong value contrast creates more weight than a subtle contrast. So if you have a dark black or in a lighter image, or a bright white in a darker image, or if you have like a bright red or a bright yellow in around muted colors, that's going to create a lot of weight and it will so by creating a lot of weight, the other side needs something larger to balance out the small bright area. So you can see this here. We have a really bright yellow, and then the black is pretty high contrast, that black, and so there's so much yellow here. To balance that out, you need these stark contrasts, and also all of these lines create interest to look here to balance out all this yellow. Now that wouldn't work, but these little lines bring your eye back to the yellow, and so it helps balance this side out. Doing asymmetrical balance is really kind of just trying to figure out one side becomes too much, then you need to figure out. So the yellow background is a lot, so there's a lot of detail over here, but there's so much detail that you now need something else in the yellow background. Okay, if we look here, the girl with the red dress is going to take up a lot of space because she has bright red. And so if you look in between the mom and the girl becomes our axis. So it's not directly in the middle, but it becomes a logical axis. And so to balance out this girl with the red and the dark shadows over here, we have a big space of light. We also have a little bit of areas of red that kind of help balance that out, and the red hair of the baby. So we're going to skip that one. So if you're using a bright color, you can see here there's a bright color, and you can use color as emphasis. So what that just means is when you're creating balance, if there can become emphasis on one area that is bright, and that will create our eye to spend more time looking at it. Okay, if you look here, you can see that the left side, the gray image, has not a lot of, the balance isn't that great. It's kind of equal, but also there's just not a lot of contrast, and our eye doesn't spend that much time looking at this balloon. But as soon as you show it in color, the red, though a similar value as the other shapes, is so bright and intense as red that we spend a lot of time looking at the red, and it balances out all the details of the shapes over here. Okay. Shapes with more complicated contours attract more attention than simple shapes. So this shape here is much more complicated edge than this, so it takes a lot bigger shape here to balance out this complicated shape. If you look at this painting, this red shape in the back is large everywhere but biggest over here. And so to balance that, there is this really complicated shape right there, and that balances each other out. Texture and pattern. Texture draws more attention than a smooth, flat value does. So if you look at here, this box right here is very texturized. So that means this side needs to be bigger if it's going to be a flat color, a flat shape, to balance it out. So if you look here, the volcano or the mountain is red and bright, takes up a lot of space. The background, if it was just blue, it would probably feel imbalanced, but because of the pattern of the clouds, and then down here the texture of the trees, that both those balance out that mountain. Position. So if something's closer to the middle, it's lighter weight than something that's far to the side. So just like in physics, which you can see here, the object off to the side is heavy, and so and then this one is not so heavy, just because of its position. And you can see the same thing happens in art. So if you look here, you would think this would be imbalanced because this side does definitely feel heavier, but because, see, the axis is right here, since it's really, the heavy part is close to the middle, it actually helps to reduce its weight, and so that this side and this side do start to feel similar weights. Eye direction, and this is something you can do with photos if you want to stage people in your house, if they're willing to do it. So eye direction can connect to sides of an image that would otherwise be imbalanced. So this side on the left has a lot more things going on than this side, but because the angel is looking at Mary, after we look here, so our eyes show each side equally. Look at each side equally. So you can kind of look at this image and decipher what you think it creates it to be equal balance-wise. But what I would say is the pattern over here. So there's a lot more going on over here, especially with the bright orange, but this pattern is complicated enough that it is balancing out all of this. Alright, so what you're going to do for your assignment is you're going to take 3 photos showing symmetrical balance, and you're going to take 3 photos showing asymmetrical balance. The photos can be just on your phone. If you do have a camera and you enjoy taking pictures, you can use your camera. But it's not required at all, of course. So make sure the photos have good composition. Make sure your photos have colors that look good together, so considered color harmony. Make sure your photos are not blurry, that they have enough light that we can see what we're looking at, but they're not washed out, too much light. And you can have fun playing with your photos and using photo editing on your phone if you like. The images do not need to be naturalistic. So you can play with your editing software on your phone as much as possible. If you don't know how to use your editing software, I would just look it up online. I did a quick Google search and I found some good stuff for iPhones but not Androids, and since I don't use Android, I didn't want to give information that wasn't applicable. So I mean, there was a lot of stuff on it. I just wasn't sure which would work for people. So just look it up and just to see if you could figure it out. Instagram has great, you can use Instagram for this and just submit the Instagram photos. Okay. I will show you my examples. So symmetrical for taking photos is harder just because there's not a lot of opportunities where things are symmetrical. So for me, I had to set up scenarios, and they're kind of ridiculous. So here's one of them, and I played with the editing software to bring out the yellows, and it's just some random toys of my son. That's like a fabric egg. Alright, the next, again, random things I had around my house to make it as symmetrical as possible. It's not perfectly symmetrical because the way the fabric stretched, this is a little off right there, but that's okay. Just doing the best you can. You could use someone's face, like a portrait would work really well for this. And then here's one of my shadows. So again, not perfectly symmetrical, but very close. And that's what I'm looking for, something pretty close. Okay, so asymmetrical, I found a lot easier. Here's a picture of my backyard. The tree takes up some weight, but especially because it's over to the edge, but then this hammock moves you down here, and so it gives you a lot to look at over here. That balances that tree out. Here I was thinking about making an image that had analogous color scheme. You're not required to pick color schemes, but it's fun to play with. And I like the shadows in the background and the light over here and all the texture that was going on. And the last one was the flower, and I was really thinking about how the flower, different colors in the flower kind of bounce your eye around. And this like vine back here goes like this, and then you kind of come back in. Alright, so that's the end of this. If you have any questions about this assignment, just send me a message and I will talk about it with you.